Hello. Now, I believe that globalists are mainly psychopaths, and the useful idiots that make up our government and civil service are a mixture of psychopaths, sociopaths and narcissists. Now, a psychopath is born that way. There's nothing they can do about it. Where there should be empathy in the brain, there are blank spaces, and I won't go into that. There's a lot of scientific information about that. Sociopaths are, shall we say, come under the spell of psychopaths, and psychopaths turn people into sociopaths or narcissists, and they kind of mimic the psychopath behaviour. Now, I've got an insight, I believe, into the way globalists think, because someone that ticks all the boxes of a psychopath married into my family. And I'm currently writing a book, and I have been for many years now, and the reason it's taken me so long is that I can only do short bursts of writing the book because it gives me chronic depression, and I find it personally very upsetting. But believe me, it's a 100% true story, and what I'll do is share with you today just a little bit of what happened in my family, and that gave me the insight into what is actually happening worldwide. So I'll try and be as brief as possible, and I won't go into all the nitty-gritty details, etc., etc. Now, my sister fell for a chap, and he dumped her for another girl. Now, okay, this happens to teenagers, but my sister took it very seriously, and it made her ill. She had glandular fever, and she's in a terrible state, and my parents were very worried about her. Well, she met a chap at work, and when he kind of came in on the rebound, shall we say. And this is the thing about psychopaths: they seem to sum people up very carefully, and they know what sort of prey to lean on. For example, if you look at, say, lions in the jungle or cheetahs, when they're going for a wildebeest, they're not going to go for the fittest and the strongest. No, they're going to go for the disabled, or the one that's a bit limp. They'll go for the easy target, and they sense with wildebeests where these, shall we say, stragglers are. Well, I think psychopaths can do the same, because my sister was emotionally very low. Anyway, cutting a long story sideways, as they say, my sister dated this chap, and he was very strange. The first time he ever came into our house, I've never forgotten it. Now, I was very young. My sister is much older than me, and in my family, we're all talkative, and most of the time you had to chime in to get a word in edgeways. I mean, that's how. And it was a happy family. We used to sing, and always, full of laughter. My uncles were stand-up comedians, and when they came over, it was just one round of laughter. And anyway, this rather morbid character came into our house, and nothing against Michael Caine, but he did have a striking resemblance to Michael Caine. He looked a little bit like him. And I'll never forget, he came into our living room, and my parents, I think, were making a cup of tea, and they left me alone with him for a very short time. And I can't remember exactly what was said, but I'd never ever come up against anybody that would not make a conversation. And it was on the lines of, hello, and there was a silence, and said, I believe you work with my sister. Still silence. Do you sort of go anywhere nice on holiday this year? Was the answer. Do you have you worked at the place very for long? And it was like it's like running to the edge of a cliff and not knowing how to stop. And in the end I was saying stupid things because I felt so embarrassed, because all this chap did was just sat and stared straight through me, didn't blink, just looked at me, and the only response you got was and he was doing it deliberately. I'm positive he was. Anyway, we had a cup of tea, blah blah blah, parents met him, and when he left with my sister, my parents said, "My word, what on earth has she met?" And they were quite horrified by this character. But anyway, time went on, and he came from a very strange family. His father was a Freemason, and his mother was like Mrs. Bouquet in keeping up appearances. And the way his family spoke, they spoke down to you. You were dirt beneath them, and you would think they were royalty. You would think they lived in a mansion. In reality, they lived in a terraced house, a very small terraced house with a postage stamp garden. But they had this sort of attitude that because his father was a mason, they were somehow superior to all human beings. And they looked on us as if, this is my family, as if we were rag and bone men. But my father was a manager in an office, and I was actually studying architecture. But they sort of, we were below them. Well, anyway, in a very short time, my sister started saying the most horrible things about us that her boyfriend had told her. And it was sort of things like, for example, my father liked to occasionally put a little bit of money on horses. It wasn't a big thing, he just enjoyed it, and he had a very calculative mind, and he worked out a little process and that, but it was pennies he put on it. And my brother-in-law, future brother-in-law shall we say, said to my sister, I think he's gambling all the money away. And then these comments got worse, and they got very, very vile. Now my father and mother were devoted to each other, and whatever was said, they knew each other very well. And he was trying to break up my parents, I believe, by saying these terrible things that had just come out of his imagination about my parents. And I can't repeat some of the things he said, but my father and mother said, if he's got something to say, he says it to our face, okay? We don't want to know the nasty things he's saying about us. And if he has got something nasty to say, he has to say it to our face. My sister went, "Oh, you're upsetting me now, because I'm telling you in all full confidence." And she started making a hell of a fuss. And she kind of blackmailed us into going along with her because she didn't want to go back to the heartbreak that she had when the previous boyfriend or fiancé broke up with her. So she was holding us under emotional blackmail, and if you said anything against or questioned my future brother-in-law, she would go into start crying and that type of thing. Well, time went on, and unfortunately she got engaged to this character and got married. And I've never forgot the wedding day, because we'd laid on a marvellous wedding breakfast, a very nice wedding breakfast, and his family, who were a load of snobs, said, "Oh no, we can't go there." So it's only my family for the wedding breakfast. Well, it's after wedding breakfast. We had a wedding breakfast in a hotel, and then there was arrangements later on. My uncle and auntie kindly opened up their house and did all the catering for us, but his family were known not to be seen. Well, leading up to the wedding and after the wedding, my sister would tell these terrible tales of woe and how terrible her future husband, or later on her husband, was treating her, and oh, how awful, what a terrible life she's having with him. Well, the easy thing is jack him in and go someplace else. But no. And what would happen is she would tell my mother these terrible tales of woe, and then when he came on the scene, she would turn against us and want all the sympathy from him. And she was like a pendulum, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards all the time. And after a while, she got more and more strange and distant. And the way my brother-in-law and sister thought or approached things was completely back to front. Good was bad and bad was good, but all the time it was criticism, criticism, criticism all the time. And I'll give you an example. Soon after my sister was married, now we're a close family, and I didn't understand what was going on in their brains at that time. For example, with his family, they were very remote, and apparently his father went into hospital for a couple of days, and it was 3 days before the rest of the family sort of realised it, because mother would come downstairs and she would, put the cutlery out and whatever for breakfast, and there was an empty space, and eventually they got a phone call. Oh, wonder where he was, sort of attitude. And there was no sort of love there, and it was as if his family were hiding some terrible secret. That's the way they behaved. And I often said, if you wanted evidence that life from another planet was living amongst us, they would have been it, because they were so weird and so inhuman. Well, one instance that really does come to mind is about a month after they married. I mean, we were really deeply saddened that we could never see my sister. And with his family, they would only see each other for something like 10 minutes once a year at Christmas, where they would sort of brag to each other what they'd done, and then that's it. And then you wouldn't see them for the rest of the... And it's really cold. And my sister would say things to my mother to upset her, and then flip the situation around. Like, for example, she'd say to my mum, well, I haven't seen you for a long time and I feel I have to. So mum would say, well, if that's the way you feel, then we won't bother. And then my sister would go, oh, you don't want to see me, you've left me, oh. And she would then switch the situation around, that we don't want to see her. And then my mother would say, well, hang on a minute, you've just said you felt that you had to see us. That's not a very nice way of putting it. So we'd say, I don't understand. You're upsetting me. You're picking on me. And start screaming. And she would go from one personality to another. And when she went to this evil personality, way she spoke was kind of what I call it precise talk. It would be sort of, that I don't understand, and everything was clearly pronounced. And eventually my mum would say, oh, I'll give up. And my sister would end her crying session instantly, just like the click of like this, and go, oh, okay, we'll have a cup of tea. And then my mother would say, well, hang on a minute, you were deeply upset a few moments ago, how comes you're not now? And she'd say, oh, we're carrying this on, oh, okay. And she'd start doing this session again. And then when my brother-in-law came home from work, he would say, they upsetting you again? And she'd go, yes, oh, it's your family. And